Welcome, dear listener, you brave soul, to Whispers in the Dark. Prepare yourself, then, for a journey into the depths of the unspoken. Draw the curtains, dim the lights, and I recommend headphones. If you are truly brave enough, you may choose to subscribe to Whispers in the Dark. It is a simple pact between us.
The Harvest Rite. They told me it was a celebration, the harvest feast, the culmination of months of toil. They smiled, they waved, and they watched, as they always watched. And I watched back from the shadows, knowing the truth of their gratitude. The town square was bathed in the orange glow of 100 lanterns. Faces, all of them smiling, all of them uniform in their quiet, unblinking joy. They swayed, they chanted, their eyes, wide and unnervingly placid, seemed to absorb the flickering light. And at the center of it all, beneath the great ancient oak, was the table, laden with offerings, gourds, bread, wine, and something else. Something wrapped tightly in white linen, shaped almost perfectly like a final gift. The elder, she stood at the head of the table, her face a mask of serene contentment. Her hands, gnarled and ancient, reached towards the linen-wrapped offering. The air grew thick, the chanting crescendoed, and the smiles, they widened, becoming something else entirely. Something joyful and utterly horrifying, because I knew what was beneath that linen, and I knew why they were so very grateful, and I knew what was next. They thanked it. They thanked the harvest, and they saw me from the shadows. They saw me. Come with us, you're with us now. Give to the harvest, you are one. Give to the harvest, give to the harvest. You reap what you sow. Give to the harvest. Before the feast, before the knowing, there was only hope. A desperate need to escape the noise. The constant, crushing hum of the city. I craved peace, silence, a place where days moved slower and the air smelled clean. That's how I found Harvest Hollow. It was tucked away, far off the main highway, nestled in a valley surrounded by ancient rolling hills, the kind of place maps barely acknowledge. When I first drove in, it felt like stepping into a postcard. Quaint houses, flower boxes overflowing with vibrant blooms, a small, perfectly kept town square. The air was impossibly still. The silence, it was profound, almost reverent. I told myself this was it, my fresh start, my sanctuary. The people, they were welcoming, too welcoming. Every face I saw held the same wide, unblinking smile. Every greeting was a soft, uniform nod. They moved with an unnerving grace, their daily routines seemingly synchronized. I watched from my porch on the first evening. Every light in every house clicked off at precisely 9 p.m. Exactly. And then, absolute darkness, followed by a faint, rhythmic humming. So low, I almost convinced myself it was the hum of my own refrigerator. And then the symbols, carved into the mailboxes, etched into the door frames, intricate swirling patterns. I rationalized it. Local folk art, old traditions, a charming eccentricity of a close-knit community. I smiled back at their wide, unwavering gazes. I nodded at their uniform greetings. My city cynicism, usually my shield, felt strangely dull here. It was a perfect place, too perfect. And I, eager to find my peace, was too willing to believe it. My sanctuary. Or perhaps my trap. Life in Harvest Hollow settled into a rhythm. Their rhythm. And the more I tried to integrate, the more I noticed. The rules, they weren't written. They were simply observed by everyone, all the time. The mornings began at 5:30 a.m. Every light in every house flickered on precisely then. By 6 a.m., the soft, uniform sounds of quiet activity, distant clatter, murmurs, would begin. By 7 a.m., the townsfolk would emerge, all at once, dressed in simple, practical clothes, always clean, always the same muted colors. They'd move towards the fields, their steps synchronized, their faces bearing that same unwavering, placid smile. And they were always watching. I'd be gardening or reading on my porch. Their gazes would find me. Not hostile, not curious, just observing. That unblinking, uniform focus. And then the silence hour. Every day from 1 to 2 p.m., the entire town would go utterly silent. Not a sound, not a voice, not a single car. Even the birds seemed to pause their songs. It was a profound, suffocating stillness, and after it, the sounds of activity would resume, precisely as they stopped, as if someone had hit mute on a remote control. And the symbols, they were everywhere now, not just on mailboxes. Intricate, swirling patterns, carved into fence posts, woven into curtains, even in the arrangements of flowers in window boxes. They seemed to pulse faintly in the sunlight, reflecting the unwavering serenity of the people's faces. It was charming, yeah, but it was also unnerving. My mind, a creature of chaos, started to feel constrained. Too many rules, too much uniformity, and a growing, undeniable sense that the rules weren't just for them. They were for me. And the smiles, they weren't welcoming, they were claiming. Summer's last breath turned to autumn's first chill, and with the changing season, Harvest Hollow's rhythm shifted. The peaceful, rigid routines gave way to something else, something ancient. Preparations for the Harvest Rite began. They started in the town square. Not decorations, carvings. Huge, rough-hewn effigies. Not of scarecrows or bountiful goddesses. These were gaunt, elongated figures. Their forms twisted. Their faces featureless, yet somehow conveying profound agony. Made of interwoven branches and dry corn husks. The townsfolk worked silently, their movements precise, their wide smiles fixed, their eyes. They sought me out. Their gaze lingered, as if they were measuring. The fields changed. Not just the usual harvest. A specific field far beyond my property line was cultivated with unnerving care. The soil there was impossibly dark. The corn stalks, impossibly tall, unnaturally pale, almost white, seemed to shimmer under the moonlight. The townsfolk would gather around it at dusk, standing in perfect silent circles, their faces upturned to the sky, their arms slowly rising and falling in unison, like a silent prayer or a collective beckoning. And the dread, it wasn't a prickle anymore. It was a cold, suffocating blanket. It tightened around me with each passing day. The smiling faces of the townsfolk seemed less welcoming, more expectant. Their gazes less observant, more focused, like hunters who had finally spotted their quarry. Because the Harvest Rite wasn't just about the crops. It wasn't just about gratitude. And as their eyes settled on me with that unwavering, placid joy, I knew, with a certainty that froze my blood, I knew what the offering truly was, and I knew who it was for. The fear was a physical weight now, a cold knot in my stomach that screamed at me to run, but I couldn't, not without answers, not without knowing exactly what they were preparing. My legs, almost against my will, carried me beyond the manicured fields past the last of the uniform houses into the ancient woods that bordered Harvest Hollow. I'd always avoided this part of the woods. It felt older, darker. The trees here were impossibly gnarled, their branches interwoven like grasping fingers, blocking out the sun. The air was thick with a scent of damp earth and something else. That same metallic sweetness from the mire, but stronger here. And then I saw it, tucked away in a clearing, almost swallowed by the overgrowth. Not a ruin, an altar, flat on top, slick with ancient moss. Carvings covered its surface, the same swirling symbols from the town, but here they were deeper, older, stained with something dark and dry. Around it, arranged in unsettling precision, were bundles of dried, pale corn husks, some tied with rough, coarse rope that looked suspiciously like hair, and fragments, bone fragments, not animal, too large, too human. And then they were there, the elders, 3 figures standing at the edge of the clearing, perfectly still. Their faces, as always, held that serene, unwavering smile. But their eyes, they were fixed on me, knowing, seeing everything. They didn't move. They didn't speak, just watched. Their gaze was like a physical weight, pressing me down, binding me to that horrific ground. And in that moment, as the realization washed over me, cold and absolute, I finally understood the true purpose of the Harvest Rite. The offerings, they weren't just for the harvest, they were the harvest. And I was the next crop. I ran. After seeing the elders, after realizing the truth of the Harvest Rite, I ran for my life. But in Harvest Hollow, there is no escape. Not when the earth itself is part of the conspiracy. The roads out of town twisted, looped. Every turn brought me back to the same ancient fields, the same unblinking corn stalks. The forest itself seemed to conspire, branches weaving into impassable walls. And as the sun began to set, casting long crimson shadows, the sound of the festival reached me. A low, unified drone. The entire town moving as one. I was caught. I found myself in the town square. Not by choice. My legs, they simply moved towards the great oak, towards the altar, towards them. Hundreds of townsfolk, all perfectly aligned, all swaying, all chanting that single terrible frequency. Their faces were luminous in the lantern light, utterly serene. Their wide smiles fixed, and their eyes, they were all fixed on the altar. And then they turned. Their gazes, unified, unwavering, fixed on me. The elder. She stood before the altar, her ancient hands trembling with purpose, reached towards something. The air thickened. The humming swelled, and my own body, it began to sway. In time with the collective, my limbs felt heavy, my thoughts sluggish, like being submerged. The smiles of the townsfolk widened further, their eyes so knowing, so accepting. The ritual progressed, a slow, terrifying dance of submission. And then, the final step. The linen. The elder. She reached. Not for an object. Not for a sacrifice. She reached for the air. And in that moment, the collective breath, it inhaled. And I became part of the harvest. The dust settled. The lanterns flickered. The scent of the fresh earth and something else lingered in the autumn air. The feast had concluded, and life in Harvest Hollow, it continued as it always has, as it always will, and I am part of it now. The days unfold in perfect sequence, the rising of the sun casting long golden light over the fields, the synchronized steps of the townsfolk as they move towards their duties, the precise turning of the soil, the careful tending of the crops. I am among them. My hands move with purpose. My steps fall in unison. My face reflects their serene, unwavering smile. I feel no hunger, no weariness, no desire, only compliance. The silence hour, it is no longer unnerving. It is peace, a deep collective stillness where thoughts merge, where consciousness is shared. I feel the awareness of the many, the collective wisdom of centuries, and I understand. This is not a town. It is an organism, ancient, alive, and perpetually harvesting. My memories, they feel like distant dreams now. My name, a forgotten whisper. I am simply part of the rhythm. The harvest is eternal, and I am home.
If your sanity remains intact, hit subscribe below to complete the pact to hear more Whispers in the Dark.